Now we've looked at assessing workloads to be moved to the public cloud that already exist and are running on premises as virtual machines, and we're looking to migrate these applications back over to the public cloud. Now, what if we want to be able to look at an application with a more sophisticated level of analysis? I want to understand the exact bill of materials. I want to be able to look at how that workload is going to be placed into the public cloud. I want to maybe make changes on top of that to see how that impacts the pricing or the performance profile that I get for that application. Clicking this Cloud App Planning button will let us do exactly that. So you can see I have a couple different samples that are preloaded here, and this information is loaded two ways. So when I hit this Import button, you can see that I have the option to connect to a Dynatrace account. So I can actually pull in telemetry data and do application discovery with Dynatrace and feed that information in here to run through and do a Cloud App modeling profile based on that imported data. I can also upload a YAML file, so we have the ability to bring in and export the data as a YAML file that will allow us to profile out the application. Or if I go ahead and hit this Create button, I can build and iterate my application using some pre-canned components that we have set up here that you can then define performance profiles and characteristics for. So a number of different ways to get the information into the system. But let's look at two different samples that we already have preloaded here. So one of them is loaded with data that we've brought into the system. And you can see here, this is a Windows 2016 system with MS SQL. I have my two application components over here, and I can then dig in and define those. I also have another app stack here that's a three-tiered application with Ubuntu, a load balancer, and a database component. And we have all of these performance profiles all characterized for this application as well. So let's scroll through and take a look at some of the options that we have here. So I can specify the amount of instances, minimum amount of CPU, the amount of aggregate CPU required. Same thing for memory. And then on the block storage side of things, I can define what the minimum requirements are for the disk as well. So everything from IOPS to read-write ratio, the block size that we're going to be working with for any of those instances, and then the same thing for any object storage components that make up the profile. Now, those are all the performance characteristics. When we click on this global settings option, I can specify the duration of the application. So when I run this optimization assessment and I look at what the cost will be to run on the public cloud, what's the duration that I have available? Am I going to be running this for 1 month? Am I going to be running this for several years? I can provide out any of those profiles here in order to get accurate information for the workload duration. Now, the other pieces I can tweak in here are the network requirements. So this is really important, especially if you're looking at applications that might be running on premises today and have characteristics of being really chatty with other applications that are neighboring and on the same local network. So when I have this kind of behavior on premises, it's not a challenge, and there's no additional cost for modeling the app that way. But when I start to move this to the public cloud, if there's a lot of inbound or outbound data, it starts to get very expensive very, very fast. So this gives me the ability to modify the data. Maybe I can change my application a little bit to compress the data that's going in, or change the flow of it, or reduce the amount of traffic and only provide a subset of data in and out of the application. And this might provide a really strong opportunity for saving a lot of money on that application. But even if we're not able to make those kind of changes, when we go through and run this optimization assessment, it's going to give me the ability to expose all those areas where there are potentially very, very high costs that are important to be aware of prior to deploying this in the cloud. Now, the last piece over here is the compliance requirement, and this lets me go through and check off any kind of compliance requirements for the application. And if I go through and check these off, what it's going to do is make sure that it only qualifies in and out different regions and different providers that allow me to go through and meet this compliance. So I have the option to enforce this, and it's not going to give me a recommendation for a deployment method that will not allow me to maintain the compliance requirement that I have in here. So let's look at modeling this out into a couple of different cloud providers. And I'm going to start by just going over to US East over here, and let's check off the regions that we have available for AWS, the ones available for Azure, and the ones available for GCP. So you can see them all shown over here. And I'll press this assessment button. Now what's going to happen on the back end is it's taking all those performance requirements and again crunching them against that back end analytics engine in order to be able to provide us with. So let's look at the results that came out of this. So we're looking at a comparison across the three different cloud providers, and we can see pretty significant price differences. But we want to also scroll down to the bottom over here and look at the line item breakdowns that we have for this particular application, because you can see up top I'm paying about $2,000 per Linux instance. So I've got 3 of those, and it's going to give me the size of that instance and 1 year upfront in order to get, most cost-effective offering from the provider. But down below, I can also see the data transfer costs, right? So this is a very significant cost over here, over $2,000, where I can find out, exactly what this transfer cost out is going to be. So I can even modify this data. Maybe I want to understand what the cost would be to shift my entire application, out of the cloud provider at a later date. I can put in the size of the app there in order to be able to see that data coming back and understand, what the cost would be prior to going through and doing that. But the real beauty of this is now I can go through, download the assessment, I can do the comparison across all my providers and be able to see how that cost is going to compare. Where is this more expensive? Where is it more cost effective? What do I get as far as, bang for the buck? And now I can go back and I can look at the app modeling side of things, and I can iterate on the design, make changes, make tweaks to this, and then see how that impacts the total price of the configuration. So again, this is a way to do a completely predictive application model where I get a breakdown of the full bill of materials, all the detail that is very difficult to get otherwise from a cloud provider. Now I have easy access to all of this for design purposes of creating new cloud native applications.